Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and back here with another video for the PlayStation 4 in terms of jailbreaking. Now, this here is more going to be a discussion video, which should hopefully be quick, and it's whether you should update your PlayStation 4 if you're on a lower firmware to 9.00 firmware. This is to make use of the recently released POOB S4 jailbreak, and I'll show you that real quick. If you need a full setup guide, I will have that linked down below in the description. However, this is how it works. What you can do is, of course, with your PS4 on firmware 9.00, you launch the user's guide or the browser, go over to your host of choice, and then load up your payload of choice. For this, I'm going to be using Gold Hen. Now right here, this is where it's going to differ from other jailbreaks. First of all, it's going to look like this is frozen, and I promise you this is not at all frozen, but we're waiting for a prompt to come up. Now once this does come up, we are going to have to insert a specially formatted USB drive for the PlayStation 4. It's nothing proprietary that we have to purchase. This can just be any standard USB flash drive that you download an image for, flash it to the drive, and then once you insert it here, you wait for that unsupported message to come up, which you then end up removing the drive. Now once you remove the drive, after a few seconds, it should say OK. I'm just going to hit OK there. It's going to say that this is loaded successfully, and that is about it. Right here, as you can see, I'm now able to load up my games, such as Extermination, a PS2 game running on the PlayStation 4, and everything is working just fine. I can even come over here to my settings. If I go all the way down, debug settings is enabled. And if I come up top, you all probably saw here that Gold Hen is enabled as well too. So the PlayStation 4 is jailbroken at this point, again on firmware 9.00. Now, when it comes to usability and launching this, there is really only one main difference on here. It's going to be utilizing a USB flash drive. And many people have pointed this out saying, I don't have a USB drive, I don't want to use a USB drive, I don't want to insert this to boot up and then unplug it whenever it's done. I think that's a non-issue. Cost really shouldn't be an issue either. If you have a jailbroken PS4, you should have a USB drive available. If you don't have an extra one, you can go out and get one. And even when it comes to cost, I'm just going to show you all this real quick. You really don't need anything super hefty either. I mean, I just looked up USB flash drive on Amazon. This is all in US dollars. But even this right here is such a overkill for what we're using. The image that we're flashing over is just over 4 megabytes, meaning we need at least an 8 megabyte flash drive, not gigabyte, I'm saying at least 8 megabytes. So this 8 gig is fine, 2 gig is fine, this 64 megabyte is fine, and look at this one here. This, including shipping, is $2.50. So for under $5, you can get any of these really cheap, no brand, no name USB drives, flash it with that image, and there you go. You have your boot device for PlayStation 4. So now that we've gotten the hardware out of the way, let's talk about stability. First of all, if you are on firmware 6.72, 7.02, or 7.55, I will say, at least from my own experiences, 6.72 was not nearly as stable as 5.05, but it worked well enough for me. However, 7.02 and 7.55, these ones I had horrible luck with. That's actually why I really didn't work on any PS4 content for quite a while, just because I didn't feel good or safe recommending these. I couldn't get them to work very well, and if I was having such difficulty utilizing these, I did not feel comfortable putting out a video and recommending using them. So I've been very happy with 9.00. Now, it's not nearly, it's not as stable, like line for line. It's not as stable as 5.05, and by that I mean 5.05, you go in here, you launch whatever payload you want to, and I'd say like 99% of the time it worked. On 9.00, the entire time I've been using it, I've had one kernel panic, which just means you have to boot up the PlayStation 4. When it force turns off, you have to pretty much rebuild the database on there, and it has a check for integrity errors, all that fun stuff, and then you boot up the PS4 again. So that's happened exactly one time. I've gotten 1 or 2 out of memory errors when trying to launch everything, But aside from that, it's been smooth sailing. And actually, stability is even increasing on here because there was a recent update to the WebKit exploits as well as POOB-S4 itself. So it's shaping up to be an incredible jailbreak and implementation, and props to the developers who have been working on this, who have released it, who have been maintaining it. Like 9.00 has been excellent for me, at least so far. So if you're on any of these kind of middle firmwares like 6.72, 7.55, 7.02, I personally believe the USB drive thing is not an issue. Just go out, get another USB drive. I would recommend updating to 9.00. If you're on 5.05, that's really going to be up to you in that regard. Now, you could stay on that lower firmware, you could work on backporting your games that you want to play, and you could just be as happy as you can be on that lower firmware. However, I guess when it comes down to it, if you have a technical reason for it, for example, if there are certain applications or payloads that are only on 5.05 because they were never ported or they might not be ported yet, it might be in your personal interest to stay there. However, if you still want to update, another option might be selling your 5.05 PlayStation 4 and getting another PS4 on a higher firmware, which is still vulnerable. Because the nice things are with 9.00, and this is for anybody who's just thinking of updating here, you really don't have to worry about backporting games, because I'm currently recording this on December, like around mid-December 2021, and really at this point here while I'm recording this, pretty much every PlayStation 4 game out is going to work on this firmware. The C-bomb issue is another big issue that was talked about on social media here, and it was actually patched here in firmware 9.00. On those older firmwares for jailbreaks, the fix is not there for the C-bomb issue. That was the kernel clock battery, or the CMOS battery there. But when it comes down to this, for firmware 9.00, even if you do not jailbreak the system, it has that fix patched into the official firmware, which is really nice to see. Plus, you're just going to be on a newer, more modern firmware, and usually that's nice. You don't have to worry about backporting games to any of those older firmwares, and I am the type of user, I don't really like backporting games, not just on PS4, but even on other systems as well too. I'd rather update the system firmware itself and just play those games as is, play my backups as is, as opposed to taking every game, patching it to run on a lower firmware, and run on my lower firmware system. I've done it once or twice with other consoles on an as-needed basis, but on the PS4, I never did that just because I'd rather update the firmware itself and then just play the games as is. But that's just me. Now, the last piece of news I want to touch up on here is a crypto coprocessor kernel exploit by Flats, which allows dumping of SAMU keys. Now, I'm going to have this linked down below in the description so you can check this out yourself. And this is a pretty short article on wollo.net from writer The Guardian, but it's even stating right here near the bottom, now, the actual usefulness of these keys is being heavily debated on the scene, with most people, including some people who have been on the scene for a while, not being sure what can be done with the keys. Let's face it, unless you've been diving into firmware reverse engineering and or homebrew programming for a while on the PS4, you won't know what each type of key can or cannot do. At the very least, PFS keys could be used to decrypt game packages, and FlatZ has stated save files can be decrypted as well. In any case, all of these are decryption, not encryption keys, so this cannot be used in isolation at least to fulfill your dreams of a permanent custom firmware on the PS4. Now, this is just to note down here because you might have seen this and you might have been a little bit worried. So really, if you have a PS4 on firmware 7.51 or lower, unless you're really doing some hardcore reverse engineering of the PS4 firmware itself, you're not really going to need this here. If you're just going to be a standard end user who you just want to load up your payloads, maybe mess around with a trainer, cheat on a few games, play your games, emulate a few other games, just mess around with apps on the PS4, then firmware 9.00 is fine. This is really only going to be relevant, being on this lower firmware, this is really only going to be relevant to people who are really doing some reverse engineering on the PS4 hardware and software itself. So there there we go. That's about all my thoughts on this, talking about higher firmwares, lower firmwares, backporting, stability, really all that fun stuff there. And I hope maybe it helps you come to your own conclusion on here, whether you want to update to the 9.00 exploit or not. I do know that people have had, varying levels of success, but that happens with any type of exploit such as this. I mean, I'm saying here that 5.05 was very stable, but I know it differs console to console, and some people were saying that it wasn't very stable for them. It is rare, but people have said that as well. But for anybody who is dreaming of having a cold booting custom firmware, that's really not going to be happening, at least anytime soon, if it's even possible. So you are still going to need to go through your internet browser, and you're going to have to launch everything through here. The only difference here being you're going to need a USB drive, but for under $5, that really has you covered. It's nothing proprietary, you just need a USB drive to get yourself up and running. But that's about it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. This is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone.